So in case you don't know, my name is Louis Ayotte. I am the president of the CIFST. And on behalf of the CIFST, welcome to our 2023 Knowledge Bites bi-weekly webinar series. Today's webinar is the first one for 2023. And our topic is the future of biologicals as a solution to ensure food security, with our speaker, Li Luong, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Nurture Growth. Welcome, Li. And
Hi.
Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Louis.
Hello.
Good morning. Hello, guests. Thanks for participating. So I helped co-founded Nurture Growth in 2015, and it was through some philanthropy work that I was doing in the community. And the co-founder, or my chief science officer at that time, saw how hard I was working in the community, and I wasn't getting paid. So, and I also had this reputation of being very diligent and hardworking. And so he had asked if I could help him launch this company. So in 2015, I thought, wow, this is a great idea, because I came from an agricultural background. In 1981, my family was sponsored by two churches. So we grew up on a farm, and my parents grew cucumbers. Every summer up until my teenage years, I would go back to the farm and hang out with my sponsors, learning about, growing, feeding the cattle and chickens. And so it wasn't like agriculture is a new, industry or a new skill that I acquired. It's something that I grew up with.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a great introduction too. And I think your skill set fits where you are now. So just before we get to the presentation, I'm going to ask Li an icebreaker question. She sort of talked about it a little bit, but anyway, I know you like everybody, you really have not been the CEO of your own company for a very long period of time. So can you tell us about your path, which you did a little bit about being on a farm and growing up that way with agriculture in your blood. But what was your first job?
So one of my first job was I was working for a private school, and I worked my way through the top, first starting off at admissions and then eventually running the financials and the business side of the private school. And because I love talking to people, and I guess I love talking in general, they promoted me to be the director of admissions. So for a number of years, I was traveling around the world, all over Asia, all over Latin America, to promote Canadian education on behalf of the private school. I also had an opportunity to live in Beijing and in Seoul as well, to establish some overseas program. And in 2011, after almost 12 years of being in education, I decided that, I wanted to try something different. I love being in education, and I miss the most my students. But, life has a really interesting way of bringing the important people back into your life, just like how, I'm roped back into agriculture after leaving it as a child. And now, with my students, many of them, I see them on LinkedIn, or bump into them at conferences, or, as I'm out in Toronto, I see them. And to this day, even though they're 30 years old or close to their 40s, they still call me Miss Li.
Oh, okay. How nice. How nice. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing part of your life experiences. For the audience members, if you have any questions for Li during her presentation, please click on the questions and answer tab at the bottom of your screen and enter your question. We will get to them following your presentation. So now over to you, Li.
Thank you. So what is the status of food security? During the pandemic, you hear about how, there is a shortage of food, and there's also, a lot of talk about the food security update. As we know, the population is increasing. Right now, we're looking at approximately 7 billion people. And out of that 7 billion people, 1 billion of those people are malnourished. And this food security situation is just going to escalate, because our population is going to explode, to 9 billion people by 2050. So where are we going to get food for these 2 extra billion people. Around the world, food inflation, is a major concern, and governments are really taking note of the high rate of inflation. The countries that are most affected by food inflation is Africa, North America, Latin America, South Asia, Europe, and Central Asia. And according to the IMF, it's anticipated that the price of food will remain high because of the war, energy costs, and weather events. So I did some research about, where is this food crisis happening? And as you can see here, this was, captured just a few days ago. You can see that the majority of the food crisis is happening in Africa, certain parts of, Asia, more like, just by India, and then also in Central America. But when you take a look at this map, you see that famine, especially in the Africa, and there are a lot of regions that are being stressed. So the population is growing. There's increasing food insecurity as shown in this map. So governments are taking note of this, and they are putting together different action plans because of, right now there is, a war in Ukraine. Everyone is still recovering from the pandemic. And, there's also economic uncertainty. There's disruption in the food supply chain. And then climate change is also affecting. So what is needed are governments and organizations to work together to help solve this food insecurity. We cannot do this alone, and we will need everyone to work together. So what are the causes of food insecurity? So here are 10. There are more, and this is in no particular order. I've just put this in this order because I will be talking about the first 3. The fast-paced population growth, climate change, food wastage, conflict, violence, and war, biofuels, natural disasters, lack of farming land. So I'm just going to go back to talking about biofuels. And what does that mean? It means that there are farmers out there that are growing crops, not for the purpose of human consumption, but for the purpose of energy. So farmers are now, not only growing food for consumption, but also growing food to produce energy. So that is also a cause. With the natural disasters, you're seeing the effects of climate change that is happening. Droughts, extreme heat conditions, floods, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And then also lack of access, to farming land. So farming land is also being reduced right now as more urban areas are starting to take over suburban and rural areas because of the population growth. Something on more of a global scale is unfair trade rules, and certain governments participate in that, but I don't want to get into too many details of that. Also, the dominance of corporate giants, and then also the financialization of food. I want to talk about the population growth. I mentioned earlier that our population is increasing. And Africa and Asia right now constitutes the greatest population growth. Some interesting facts that I hope you can take away from this talk, I thought was pretty interesting, is that there are 3,000 births every 20 minutes. And as a result, there's also a loss of plant and also animal life as well because of the impact of increased population. So another interesting fact is that China and India have a combined population of 2.7 billion, which constitute over 35% of the world population. And another very interesting fact I found was that if Facebook was a country, it would be the 3rd most populous. So how can we leverage social media to help spread the message about how we can really improve and help with the food insecurity. And I think that, using the power of social media, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, I think that it can be a very powerful tool to help spread the message. Another effect is climate change, and farmers are experiencing more intense climate conditions. They're having longer periods of rain in certain areas. There's drought in other areas. So I'll give you an example. I was in Napa Valley in November, and in the last year, I'll probably visit Napa Valley three times just to meet with some of our grape growers and some of our farmers who are trialing our product. So in Napa, they're having extreme drought conditions. And as a result of having this drought, their yield has decreased. So they definitely have that, the effects of climate change. And then most recently, there's been intense flooding in the Sacramento area, which is not too far away from Napa Valley. It's probably around a 2-hour drive. So I'll be very interested to see how that is going to be affected. Another example of climate change is unexpected frost. A few years ago, Bordeaux lost 40% of its grape production because of unexpected frosts. There's, storm surges, cyclones. So all this is really challenging growers to plan and also grow food to feed the population. And then fresh water is also becoming very scarce. So in Ontario, especially in Ontario and in most parts of Canada, we have an abundance of water. So we can water our lawns, we can shower and bathe, we can have fill water, fill our swimming pools with water. However, in certain parts of Canada and in certain parts of the United States, they actually have a water restriction advisory. And I remember seeing this when I was in California, where they actually limit the number of showers, or they have signage to really encourage you to limit the number of showers that you can have. Or very interesting, it was that there was also a law where if you were on the even side of the street, you're allowed to water your lawns on certain days. And then if you're in the odd, if your house number was odd, then you were able to water on another days. So in terms of our water resources, were really being stretched of the amount of water. But here in Ontario, we have so much water. We get lots of rains, and our farmers here, really benefit from that. They can irrigate their land, through different sprayers, but a lot of them just rely on the rain. Whereas in California, and in certain parts of Florida, they would have to irrigate their vineyards just because there's just not enough water. I also wanted to talk about food waste. Food waste is a growing concern for food insecurity, because a third of the food that is produced is often wasted. And what happens to that food that's wasted is that a lot of it either sits in landfills, and as it sits in landfills, it produces methane, a toxic greenhouse gas. They say that the world produces enough food. However, due to storage, due to transportation, and also in certain parts of the world, we want the perfect fruit. Like, how many of you, when you go to a grocery store and you see like the bananas, you want to pick the perfect banana or the perfect apple? Like, you don't want any blemishes on that. We in North America, I guess, are very fortunate to have that luxury of picking the nicest fruits. Or when we go into a grocery store, we see an abundance of fruit and vegetables. But the reality is that in many parts of the world, they don't have that luxury. I remember walking through the streets of Chandigarh in India. It was a food market. And I was looking at the vegetables, and they weren't the best looking vegetables, they were kind of wilted because it was very warm. And they didn't seem like they had a lot of different varieties, and they didn't have an abundance, of it. So when you take a look at food waste in North America or developing countries, there's definitely more than I guess in the developing countries. In the developing countries, food waste is a result of lack of storage, lack of transportation, and in North America, food waste is a result of consumers wanting the best products. They want something fresh. They want blemished animals. Another interesting fact was that FAO calculated that 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted every year. Imagine that amount of food that can go to feed people, right? So we really have to look at the distribution of where that food can go to. So how can we achieve food security? So there are five points that I thought about how we can help achieve this. The first is using fertilizer more efficiently, improving energy and water efficiency, raising awareness, reducing food waste, and closing the yield gap. So with synthetic fertilizers, they have a significant impact on the environment. So what happens is that when plants consume synthetic fertilizer, it's only able to absorb approximately 40%. And whatever it doesn't consume gets released into the environment. So it leaches into the soil and then eventually into the waterways. And as a result, you can see here, you see this green algae. And that's because of the plant not being able to uptake those nutrients, and then as a result it's going to the waterway. And what happens when the algae takes over certain waterways is that it starts to suck the oxygen out of water, and now it prevents oxygen in the water, which affects the fish and the aquatic system. With NASA, they were able to take from one of their satellites an image of the Great Lakes. And during certain times of the year, you can see the algae bloom around the Great Lakes. So there's definitely emphasis, not only from the environmental agency, but also from the Energy Association department in the United States, and also different farming and growing communities really taking note about the effects of fertilizer and how we can really reduce the impact of fertilizer in our environment. So one of the solutions are biologicals. Last year, I attended a conference called the World Ag Tech Conference in San Francisco. And all of the big fertilizer companies were talking about the importance of biologicals. When I first founded Nurture Growth, when I was talking about biologicals to farmers and talking to different people, they weren't very receptive of it. They didn't understand it, or I didn't do a good job explaining, the benefits of biologicals. 7 years later, I'm still talking about biologicals. But the great thing now is that I'm not the only one that's championing this. Now, the big fertilizer companies are also championing this as well. And one of the key takeaways from this conference is that the fertilizer companies need to work hand in hand with biologicals in order to achieve food security. We cannot do this alone. We cannot completely eliminate chemical fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers, because we need the crops to feed our population. So if we were just to stop it altogether, we would have a starving population. However, with the addition of the biologicals, you can reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers and also reduce the impact on the environment. So what are biologicals? Biologicals are a formulation that contains living microorganisms in there. So biologicals can be stimulants, they can be biopesticides. The product that we produce is a biofertilizer. So it doesn't contain any nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And our product is one of many products that are available out there on the market for different growers to use. So what are the benefits of biological? First of all, it can really help to increase the nutrient availability. So when it's used in conjunction with synthetic fertilizer, it actually helps to kickstart and take those nutrients and make it available. So you're able to reduce the amount of fertilizers. In general, biologicals are able to reduce synthetic fertilizer use between 30 to 50%. And the reason why is that plants really consume around 40% of the synthetic nutrients that we provide of it, and the rest of it is expelled into the environment. So here we have a solution where it's a balance of feeding the population, but also growing sustainably using biologicals. The second thing is it can help with root development. And with helping with root development, your plants become stronger. Just like a house, when you build a strong foundation, you have a strong house. So same thing with plants. When you have a strong root system, that means the plants are healthier. I've seen different trials where strong root systems, and I'll show you in a bit some examples of some strong root systems. And because of the root systems, they're able to retain water and improve that soil health. Another benefit of using biological is to helping suppress disease and pests. And how it does that is through that soil microbiome, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. It also helps to maximize genetic potential. But I think most importantly is that it really helps to promote sustainability. You know, we have to preserve our soils and the environment for our future generation. And if we don't do that, our children, our grandchildren are going to be paying for it, and they're going to have less resources, than we do now. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about biologicals and different organizations or different companies that have biologicals. At Nurture Growth, we have a consortium of microbes. So what we're doing is that we're taking nitrogen from the atmosphere and we're converting it into nitrogen available for the plants. And the soil contains phosphorus and potassium. However, it's locked. So our microbes are able to take the phosphorus and potassium from the soil, extract it. And this is one of the ways that we can reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers to reduce the impact on the environment and also to help out with food security. There are a lot of companies that have different formulations. This is our formulation where, we're classified as a biofertilizer, but we also have biostimulant and bioinoculant benefits. And we also have more microbes and a higher concentration. So what does that really mean? Is more better? It really depends on the farmer and really explaining the value to the farmers about the benefits of using biologicals. And we believe that by providing them with a consortium of microbes this way, instead of the farmers or a company saying, hey, plants, why don't you use our product and we will give you the nutrients that it needs. Instead, biologicals and different formulation, what it does is that it releases these beneficial microbes into the soil and it interacts with other microbes in the soil. So with our microbes, what it does is that if there is an overgrowth of certain microbes in the soil, it will help to go balance out the soil microbiome. So plants have a way of telling you whether it's sick. So for example, when it's lacking nitrogen, the plants are yellow. And this is because there is an overgrowth of certain nutrients in the soil. And this is where biologicals can really help to improve that soil health and then balance out that soil microbiome. Because when you're using chemical fertilizer, what it does is that you're stimulating the plants, and the plants are growing really rapidly, but you might not get the nutritious food. Whereas biologicals like Nurture-Growth, not only are you improving the soil health, but you're feeding the soil, and then you're also feeding the plants. And as a result, it's a lot more nutrient dense, and then also abundant as well. I mentioned earlier about beneficial microbes and how it works. So we've seen in a number of trials that we conducted in Napa, also in Niagara and Norfolk County, is that we're able to help to increase the health of the plants. For example, we ran a trial on apples recently, and on a non-bearing, when they say non-bearing, meaning the first 3 years of an apple tree, you don't really produce apples, because you want to concentrate all the energy in growing the roots and also the plant, so that it can continue to produce apples in the future. And in that trial, we found that by using our product, the apple tree was able to grow a whole foot taller, and had great results. So that's an example of plant health. It also helps to build resiliency against climate change. And how it does that is through the root structure. As I mentioned earlier, when you have a strong foundation, it's able to withstand climate conditions. So in the example of extreme heat, and I'll show you the example of this, in the example of extreme heat, because you have a strong root system, it's able to grasp the soil. And then it's also able to store the water in the roots as well. So this way, it has a stronger ability to withstand drought. In this trial that I ran on Bactroy, you can visibly see the difference between the treated and the untreated. And this was within, I would say, 9 meters of each other. So this was in a loop house. So you can see the significance of using biological products and really helping with that soil health and helping with the yield increase. So in this particular trial that we did, we were able to increase the yield between 30 to 50%. Here's some other examples of some root development using Nurture-Growth versus treat as well. By using biologicals, you can see that there's a stronger root growth, and then as you're having stronger root growth, it produces healthier plant. In this onion trial that we did, what we saw was that during a windstorm, there was extreme winds. The area that was treated with Nurture-Growth was able to bounce back a lot quicker. Whereas the area that was not treated with Nurture-Growth, we basically had to destroy that area of the onion patch. So that concludes my presentation about food security, where we're at, and what are some of the things that we can do, and how biologicals can play a positive role in helping out with food security. We cannot do this alone. We need governments involved. We need academia. We need organizations like CFIN, to continue to educate their members and the general public about the situation of food. And together, we can work together to feed the world more sustainably. Thank you.
Well, Lee, thank you very much. On behalf of the CIFST, thanks again for this informative presentation. You talk about biostimulant, biofertilizer, and bioinoculant. What are the difference between the three of them?
Yeah. Essentially, they have the same end results. So they help to increase the yield, they help to increase the plant's health. However, with a biofertilizer like Nurture-Growth, where we have biostimulant and bioinoculant benefits, that is where I guess that, they say more is better in this case. So we are able to inoculate the plants, with our microbes, and we're helping to stimulate, the plants with these beneficial, microorganisms.
Okay, perfect. And so those are the differences. Well, thank you very much for explaining that. Greatly appreciate it. Do we have any questions?
No, not yet, but I have a question for Lee. Lee, my question is, when you grow the plants with the biologicals, does it actually make the food more nutritious?
Yes, so there's studies that we've conducted on apples, on blueberries, where we found that by using a biological, like our product, we are able to help increase the flavor profile, so the sugar content levels. So you'll be able to have like a sweeter fruit. So in an apple trial that we did in Georgian Bay, we were able to increase the sugar content of the apple by 3 degrees, and 3 degrees is quite significant. On trials that we did on grapes as well, we're able to increase the brick level, the sugar level in the wine grapes. And that's important for the grape growers because they get paid based on their brick level. So the higher the brick level, then their grapes are valued more. And they also have to use less sugar and less ingredients to kind of balance out, that flavor profile. So it's very important. And one of the research that we're going to be conducting in the future is the nutrient density. So with our product, our biologicals, how can it help to increase more, certain nutrients? So for example, on a trial that we did on lettuce, we were able to show the farmer that, it was definitely increased the yield. It grew more evenly, but what the farmer noticed, like visibly, was the difference in the color of using a nurture growth product versus, his conventional, was that it was a deep color, like the red lettuce, and the greens were the vibrant greens. And his whole farming philosophy was producing nutrient dense food. So we're able to help him with that. And as
Perfect. Excellent. So we do have a question from Anna Shapiro. Thank you for the presentation. Because there are living microorganisms in the formulation, is the window of application affected as a function of microbes' age? Also, storage and transportation of biofertilizers is affected. Is that correct?
Yes. So with our product, so our secret, our patent is that we are able to put our microbes in a dormant stage in a very high concentrated formula. So this way it helps to reduce the cost of transportation. And then also we have a longer shelf life. So our product is able to have a shelf life of a minimum 2 years.
Nice.
Yeah. So we've done some trials, because we have a cold climate here in Canada.
Right.
So we tested where we've frozen our microbes for 3 years, and we taken it out of storage to see what sort of degradation, to try to mimic what it's like for a farmer that is going to be storing it in his shed, for example, right? And we found that there was very minimal degradation. We've also tested it on the extreme end. So when I was in India, as you know, with India, it's very hot in certain regions.
Getting hotter and hotter too.
It's getting a little more hot. So we had to store it, in a storage facility that didn't have air conditioning or wasn't climate. So it was literally 30 degrees plus.
Okay.
Yes. And that was inside the storage facility.
Right.
And we tested our product, so it had no effect at all. So, with our formulation, we are able to, number one, put it in a dormant stage. Even though they're living, they're kind of like in the sleeping mode, and it gets activated and starts reproducing only when it's added with water. And when yes. So when it's added with water, because it's a concentrated, and then it's applied to the plant and interacts with other microbes, that is when it starts to multiply. So if you were to pour the microbes, our formulation directly on without mixing with water, you basically will kill your plants because
Oh, geez. Okay. Okay.
yes. So that's why
Don't want that. Don't want that.
do not that. We're also certified organic as well through online
Okay.
and through ProCert. So even though a lot of our farmers are conventional growers, we do have some organic growers that use our product. And
Right. Exactly. Yes.
there's very few products out there like biologicals that are certified organic, and we're one of those companies.
Okay. So let me check if we've got any other questions. No, that's the only one that we had. So hang on, what do we have here? No, hang on. No, that's it. That's the only one that we have. So we're finishing a little bit early, okay? And I understand that the people, I'm in Montreal, so we're getting the storm tonight, okay? I understand that you're already in the storm in Toronto area. So people in the Toronto area, we will let you leave a little early and you can go to your shovels. So take care of yourself. And it was a great presentation. Again, thank you very much, Lee. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for joining me on this stormy day.
Yes, take care of yourselves.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye. Stay safe.